Okay, morning everyone. There's a bit of a. Morning everyone. A huge welcome to the Devon Craft Festival. Sorry, the Digital Craft Festival. Thank you for joining us here live in Devon and Derbyshire. I'm Laura Worsley. I'm from Make Southwest, formerly known as the Devon Guild of Craftsmen. We're an education charity based on the edge of Dartmoor, supporting a community of over 300 makers across the Southwest, along with an education outreach gallery and exhibition. So please check out our website, which is www.crafts.org.uk. I'm joined this morning with Flora Pearson, who's our exhibitions manager, and we are today talking to the fantastic sculptor and printmaker, Jeremy James. But before we start, can I just say that you will all be muted throughout the workshop. And if you do want to ask Jeremy anything, please add all your questions to the chat on the right-hand side, and we'll do our best to get them all answered this morning. So, good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. It's wonderful. I hear there's quite a few people in the room, so that's really good. So hopefully it's worth coming along for this morning.
Brilliant. Okay. So, do you want to kind of just let us know what you'll be doing today? You're going to do a demo for us?
I'm going to do a demo. And what I thought I'd do is try and make something from start to finish, which is always a bit of a challenge with the kind of work I made. I'm always slightly jealous of the people that can throw pots, in a couple of minutes, and there it is, it's finished, it's complete. Sort of modelling and hand building, as many of you might well already know, takes a bit longer. So I'm going to try and do something that isn't too large. So hopefully I haven't bitten off too much. And we'll have something in about 40 minutes that's completed. And I'm going to be making one of my cats. And these are things that I've only been doing in the last few months, really. So I'm still sort of, they're still quite fresh to me. I'm still really enjoying them. I've got a couple here. So that's one. You can see these on the website. I'm going to be making something along those lines.
Right.
Okay. Another cat here. I did think about making this one, but I think this one's probably a bit too ambitious. It's called Cat and Windy Day. And they're both inspired by Cornwall, really. I grew up in Cornwall. So, and we had lots of cats in our house. And so it's bringing those two things together of kind of Celtic crosses and cats. And it's a way I'm working more and more, really, of kind of bringing separate things together that I enjoy and just seeing what sort of arises from the meeting of those two things. So they're quite fun to make. I'm quite enjoying doing them at the moment. So that's the idea. I'll be making some of those. But I can also talk a little bit about my printmaking and drawing and things like that along the way. And please do feel free to kind of ask questions, whether they're questions about the nature of the work or whether they're more technical questions. I'm happy to answer them all. Is that okay?
Yeah, brilliant.
Right. Okay. Right. So we'll make a start then. Hopefully, what we've got is a couple of cameras set up, a kind of general view, and then we've kind of got a more detailed view that hopefully you can see.
Yeah.
But Laura, if you give me a nudge if you can't see stuff, I may need to
yeah. Yeah.
So most things start with drawing books, and I keep lots and lots of them. And some of them are drawing books for kind of observational drawings. So if I can show you, this is the best camera for that.
Oh, up here, yeah, I'm doing that. There you go.
Okay. So some of them kind of observational drawings, and other things. Let's see some more here. So going to places and drawing things in front of me, and that's really important. And sometimes you can see things kind of more. This was a sleeping hare on an island that I went and visited a few years ago in East Anglia. So there's that kind of drawing. And then there's drawing, which is more, I suppose you'd call it sort of design drawing, really, which is working out what it is that I'm going to make. And so if we've got any cat drawings here, let's have a look. Yeah, I mean, sometimes there'd be quite simple things like that, really, some almost diagrammatic drawings that just show where I might start to put colours and glazes and how things might start to appear. So I do a lot of this. I do a lot of this whilst I'm making, before I'm making. I often draw things when I've made them. And some of them are quite scrappy and don't really mean a lot to anyone else. And other times they become a bit more kind of resolved and finished. And I tend to draw things again and again and again as well. And it's interesting how they change, they sort of alter over time. So that's how most of the work actually starts. And then it starts with this stuff, or it follows on with this stuff, which is the clay. And I spend a lot of time in the studio just mucking about with it, just playing with it, seeing what I can actually do with it. So we're going to start this. I'm going to start this demo because I'm aware that I can easily run out of time on these things with this. So hopefully you can all see this. How's that looking, Laura? Can you see that? Okay?
Yeah, I've done a zoom on your hands, so everyone can now watching you in action.
Okay, so solid lump of clay. This is a stoneware kind of groggy clay. Not too groggy, but it's got some grog in it. Grog is particles of clay which are fired and they're ground up and combined with soft plastic clay, and it gives it a tooth, an edge, which aids hand building. So this is a solid block of clay at the moment, and I'm going to make the base for this cap. So I used to slab build these, and it was taking so long, and then the slabs always kind of kept splitting, and you know, joins would split, so it never kind of worked terribly well. I was never very happy with it, so I kind of was looking for a way of making a base fairly swiftly that didn't have any of the joining problems, and I came up with this. So I start by just making a hole. This is going to be the bottom of the piece. In a minute.
We've got a first question, Jeremy. How can I ask how firm the clay is? Is it kind of leather-like when you're kind of throwing, or?
Very soft.
Yep. Okay.
Malleable.
Wow. Yeah.
Change the shape really quickly. Very malleable, very soft, but not sticky. You don't want it to be sticky. So at this point, what I usually do is put a signature on it, which always seems a slightly strange thing to do, sign something before you've only just done it. But that's ceramicists for you, that's the way they work. So I roll a little tablet of clay and I just push that in the bottom. I'm going to hold this up so you can see it. I wouldn't normally, I kind of...
You can hold it up to the laptop. Oh, right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right, yeah. Oh, back again. Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm going to press a little stamp in. I'm just going to go up to that one.
Yep.
Can you see that?
Yep, perfect.
So that's that. Okay, so there's the piece. And then I'm just going to wire the sides down. So I'm just using an ordinary wire here. And this is forming the block, forming the stand for my cat. Okay. Trim those off.
So, Jeremy, you've been making and exhibiting since 1987, I've read.
No, yeah.
You know, how did it all start? And you know, what were you making?
I did a fine art degree. I wasn't going to be a potter or a ceramicist. I did a fine art degree, and it was the kind of degree that had lots and lots of different areas. They had painting, printmaking, sculpture, video, film, photography, all sorts of areas. And one of the areas they had was ceramics. And I went into this ceramics area, not really knowing anything about ceramics, but they tried to get us to move around the different areas to experience them all in the first term. And I'm just going to break off from that and just show that. So that's my block. And it's got a base, which is kind of more or less hollow as well. And then I can just tighten that up a little bit with the right tool, if I can find it. Here they are. These little paddles, which are kind of old printing plates, actually. But I can use them just to press the clay into shape. So if I've got any rough areas, I can just change that shape slightly. Yeah, so I got into the ceramics area, which I think was meant to be a sort of a 1 week tryout. And I was just so fascinated by the whole process. I liked the objects in there. I liked the tools that were being used. I liked the things that people were making. I liked the fact you had to put this thing into a kiln and fire it. and then it came out sort of hard and tough. It was extraordinary. So after a week, we were meant to move on to photography or video, and I didn't move on. I just stayed there, and that was it for 3 years. I stayed in that department because I was so enthralled by it all. But what was interesting about the area was that it wasn't an area where we made pots. It was an area where we made sculpture, and there was 1 or 2 pots made, but mostly with people using ceramics as a sculptural medium. And so that's how it began, really. I just started making and modeling, and just, you know, very quickly found that this was the thing I just absolutely loved. Yeah.
Right.
So here's my block. Now, one of the things I quite like to do is just texture these blocks slightly. And so I use these stamps. I use stamps quite a lot. And these are made from clay. So they're made by pressing textures into the clay and then firing them. And they're very soft. They're only fired to biscuit temperature, so they're still very porous. So when I press clay into them, the clay doesn't stick. It actually comes away as a texture. And I've made loads and loads of these, and you can make them in sort of tablet form like this, where you can press things against, or you can actually make kind of things like this, which are like stamps that you can actually put in clay. So they're very easy to make, because you just made them from clay and you fire them, and you can end up by using tools to make the texture, press them into brickwork, stone, anything you can find. And you can make boxes and boxes of them very quickly. So here's typically a box of mine. So I've got lots of them in here, and you can have swirls and different kinds of textures. So they're great fun to make. They're really fun to make and to try out. So going back to this one. So I'm just going to put a bit of texture on the top surface of this. No, not on the top surface. I think I'll put it on the side surface, actually. So I can just put that on there, and I can just press gently into it. I'll show you this in a minute. And you can probably see there, I kind of get various textures and things on it. I don't know which the best camera is for that.
I'll pin on the other one. Hang on a minute. Ta-da. Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Great.
And then that can be just tightened up with this. Right. So I'm just going to leave that for the moment. That's a little bit soft. And ideally, what I would do is I'd make quite a few of those to harden up, whilst I then got on with other things.
You've got a cat that you model on?
Yeah, we've got 2 cats, and anybody who owns cats, you know, you do end up looking at them a lot. You kind of absorb them, don't you? And it's interesting. You know, when I produce them, I realized they're one of our 2 cats, and that it wasn't intentional at all. It's just you pick up those forms and those shapes. It's a strange sort of knowledge that you kind of absorb almost by osmosis. So the key with kind of modeling really is to get a basic shape fairly swiftly. I think a lot of people who kind of begin modeling things often get kind of quite absorbed in detail too early on, and goodness, that is certainly easy to do. You start to become absorbed in their face or their leg, and the problem with that is you can get a beautifully modeled leg or face, and then it's completely out of proportion to the rest of the body. It doesn't fit. So it's a bit like anybody who's been taught to draw. You know, you don't do one bit of a drawing. You try and keep the whole drawing kind of working at the same level. So it's kind of developing at the same level. So it's the same with sculpture. One of the nice things about making small things like this, I always think, is you can hold them in your hand. So it's unlike big things, which are kind of falling over and flopping. This you can actually just hold in your hand. You can move around, you can add bits, you can take away bits. So I'll just do a bit more to this one, try and get it starting to look like a cat. And this is where your drawing would actually come in as well, trying to sort of look at that and think about what are the chief characteristics of this cat. I'm just going to get his ears on. Because this clay is nice and soft, I can just join things at this stage without any slip or any kind of water or anything like that. I can just fuse the things in. I can just add bits on like that. So at the moment, I'm not using any modeling tools. I probably will do in a moment, but most of my work is done just with 1 or 2 modeling tools and really just your fingers, really.
I'm just adding your website into the chat so everyone can see.
Yeah, please do go and have a look.
All your work. I'm just adding that in, and I'm also adding in your Instagram, so for everyone to follow.
I think of us yesterday. There was yesterday morning. I had over 80 new sculptures. There's not quite that many left now, but there's still a lot of sculptures left for people to look at, including cats and Cornish crosses and various other things.
And also talking.
Sorry.
Just talk about your printmaking as well, Jeremy. So.
Yeah, I started
the kind of crossover from your sculptor work.
Yes, I mean, I've always drawn things. Sorry, just concentrate on this.
Yeah, sure.
It's all right. So yeah, I've just added some cheeks, and that's kind of starting to get a kind of cat-like quality. I don't know how well. Can you see that, guys? Is that all right?
Yep. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. I'm just going to pop some front legs. I will come back to the printmaking just now in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just going to pop some front legs on him, so they can just be rolled as coils. And I tend to, whenever you've got legs and ears and things like that to do, try and make them together. If you make one and then kind of really get involved in the modeling of it, then you try and make the other one, it will never match. So always try and make the 2 things together if you can, like those 2 don't match. So it's very quickly, you can easily just do another one. So these are just rolled out like that, and just squeeze out a little bit more. It's a very immediate thing, modeling with clay. It's you know, it's not like using molds and I don't know, other kind of more complex armatures and casting and all that. It's, you know, what you see is what you get straight away. And I really enjoy that immediacy. You know, you can think of a leg and then you've got a leg. You know, there's very little kind of standing in the way of it.
We've got a quick question from, could you use air drying clay for what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely the same. Yep. You can, all these things apply to air drying clay apart from the firing bit. So it'll react in much the same sort of way. A lot of air drying, excuse me, a lot of air drying clay has sort of fibers in it and they're put in it to sort of strengthen the clay as you're kind of working it and as it dries. So it does feel a little different, but it should work in much the same way really as this. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, get down to that craft shop, get a bag of air drying clay if you've never had a go at it at all. Or, as I constantly tell my students, go into your back garden, get a shovel and dig down and you'll find clay. You'll find clay down there. If you look up how to refine that clay online, because there's loads of tutorials about that, you'll be able to learn to use your own clay from your own garden. And you could even build a small kiln in your garden, a little wood fire kiln. So it's a very clay is found everywhere in the world, including Antarctica, everywhere. It just depends on how deep down you have to go for it. But certainly in our garden, you don't have to go very deep. Remove the topsoil and you'll get to clay. Okay, so I've got some legs. I'm just going to give him some front paws now to just there. So again, they're just added quickly and easily. I'll come back and do a bit more modelling to him. I'm just going to indicate his back paws as well. Or his back, yes, his back legs. So all this is kind of quite crude at the moment, and the refinement goes on in a moment. But it's important to kind of get the attitude of him right. So this is where you can kind of sort of change the angles of the head. Even the tilt of his ears, you'll find, will kind of give him a different sort of quality. Okay. So this is where I'd start to use a modeling tool now, just to give it a little bit of form. Make sure you can see this. so I can kind of round those haunches. So again, trying to work on it symmetrically, really, because this clay is a little bit soft, but that's okay. So yes, the printmaking sort of happened about 10 years ago. I went on a course with Richard Borden, who's Edward Borden's son, who some of you might know, a very famous printmaker from middle of the last century. And it was printmaking is something I'd done at college, but I'd never really kind of pursued again. But I remember I really enjoyed it. So I went on this course and really had such fun on it, such enjoyment about making prints, that I started making more prints when I got home from lino, and just did more and more of it. And it took off, really. It's a lovely foil to making things in clay. It doesn't have any of the kind of technical problems of clay, in the sense that if you want a landscape, you can just have a landscape. You just put a landscape in, whereas in clay, well, how do you do that? How does that happen? So it's a really nice thing to do. I'll show you some of the prints in a moment, but I'm going to do a little bit more work on this one. Right, so I want to kind of refine. I don't know how well you can see me modelling that face. If I,
yeah, do you want to?
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the people who have just joined, if you do want to ask Jeremy any questions, please just add it into the chat, and we'll ask as many as we can throughout the session.
Okay, so it's a kind of face that doesn't really have any features yet. So I'm going to start putting some features on it. So hopefully you can see this in close up, because is that visible, Laura?
Yep.
Okay. So this is where you start to get a bit of character. The creature starts to come alive, hopefully. So this is where, if you wanted to make one, this is where you need to kind of start looking at your own cat, thinking about how you want the ears. The ears are incredibly expressive on a cat. Anybody who's ever owned a cat, or even just anybody who's just watched a cat, kind of knows how much emotion and mood they convey through their ears. And so this is where you can actually tilt them and do all sorts of different things. So if you want a kind of frightened cat, you can have the ears down. If you want that kind of, you know, when they raise one ear because they've just heard something, you can do things like that. So you can have great fun with the ears. So I think what we'll do is we'll have this one as a bit of an alert cat, and then one ear back down. So he's kind of listening to two things at once almost. You know, when they do that, they kind of they can hear the feeding bowls, but they can also hear the cat flap. And
a lot going on. Yeah.
Not quite sure what's
first. Yeah,
what's first.
We've got a couple of questions. So
yep.
Which method would you use to reproduce several copies of this cat, or other kind of sculptures that you make?
Well, I wouldn't really make copies of it. What I tend to do is make runs of things. So I'll you know, if it's a sort of theme with cats that I'm interested in, I'll have several on the go. Like this is a good case in point, actually. This clay is a little bit sticky. I don't know how well you can see it from it's just a little bit sticky to kind of work. It's all right, but ideally it's just got a little bit too much moisture in it. So what I would do, if this was a working day, I'd now put that to one side, and I'd make another one. I might make 3 or 4, and that's really beneficial, because what I tend to find is, I mean, it helps the stickiness because it helps the thing dry out, but also you start to get a relationship between one sculpture and another, and you start to think, yeah, I'll put a bit more of that into that sculpture. So they start to feed off one another. So I tend to make runs of things rather than kind of copies of things. I get bored very quickly. And so if it's, you know, if I had to kind of keep reproducing the same thing again and again, I think I'd be really a bit fed up with it. Mm. Just go ahead.
And one more question.
Yep.
Will this piece need to be hollowed out before it's fired, or is it small enough that you don't have to do this?
Yeah, excellent question. It's this is small enough for it to be fired just as it is. So I don't know if you can see how thick that is. Well, you can probably see in relation to my hands how thick it is. That would be fine. The clay has been wedged and kneaded well
okay.
before I started modeling with it. So hopefully it hasn't got any air bubbles in it. And because it's a very groggy clay, it shouldn't be an issue. Right, I'm just going to add some eyes now to him. Now, trying to model eyes is really difficult. There's lots of ways, different ways of doing it, but I've made this little tool. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of like a leaf shape. It's made out of clay and then it's biscuit fired, but it's got quite a carefully made leaf shape. And I can use that as a stamp to put his eyes in. So let's see, can you see that? Yeah. And also it's got the advantage of getting the eyes even. Is that okay, Laura? Can you see that?
Yep. Yeah.
But of course he's a bit blind at the moment like that. So, so what you can do is if you just put the irises in, and of course that's another way of actually giving the piece a bit of character, because you can have them looking directly ahead or to one side. So we're going to have this one slightly sneakily looking to one side. He's kind of heard that cat flap, I think. Does that make sense?
Excellent.
So we can do a little bit more to him here. So this is using the edge of the tool just to make some marks. And this is the point really, which I think a lot of people starting sculpture kind of find quite difficult, is how you know, how do you say fur? How do you kind of replicate fur? And that's what I meant at the beginning of this talk about you or me spending a lot of time just mucking about with clay. And so it's kind of finding ways of doing things, you know, finding a tool that does, you know, just the right kinds of marks. And if you do that to it and you roll the piece, you get those kind of textures that sort of represent fur, but don't try and mimic it. And I think that's always the mark of you know, when a sculpture becomes successful, it's something that's not trying to replicate it. It's not something that's trying to copy it. It's something that's just it's producing almost like an equivalent of fur. And so everyone looks at it and think, yeah, I know what you mean. I've seen cats like that. I've seen cats who've kind of got that sort of fur. So I'm just using the edge of this tool. But I think a lot of it is just mucking about with clay, finding out what you can do with clay.
We've had someone ask, can you hear me? Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We've had someone ask whether you make your own tools. I know you talked about making the stamps from the biscuit fired clay.
These tools, no, I don't. I think I made that. I made a wire, but only because I was so frustrated with the wires I kept buying for extortionate prices, and they kept breaking. So I ended up using some picture hanging wire and, you know, a couple of bits of dull. But these sorts of tools, no, I don't. These come from a company in London called Taranti, which are sculptor suppliers. So if you look them up online, they've got a you know, website, lots of business.
Okay, thank you.
Very welcome. Right, I'm just going to leave him to just harden up a little bit, and I'll come back to him in a minute. I will probably do more modelling to him, but he's just about there. I want to keep him quite fresh and easy and not too laboured. So I'll put him to one side. So what I can do is just maybe talk a little bit about the prints, just to...
Yeah, definitely.
Right, just let me swirl my hands off. My sink here.
I will
I used to work in, incidentally, everybody. This is my this is what I call my clean room for printmaking and packing work. But it had the better light, so for the video we thought we'd do it in here. So this is how. Oh, you might need to go to the other. I don't know which.
I go to. I think it's probably better at that one, but I'll show. Yeah. Yeah, it's better at the lap. I think it's better on the laptop.
Okay, guys, there we go.
Yeah, that's it.
Got a superb producer director here in the form of Laura. She's
very new, very new.
Working with the BBC soon.
Yes.
So this is how they're made, these lino prints. This is a piece of lino, and lino is quite interesting material. It's cork, which is ground up, and then it's combined with linseed oil. And then it's compressed, it's kind of forced together, and you get this amazing material. It's exactly the same stuff that we all used to use in kitchens and bathrooms, and some of us still do if we can afford it. And then it's backed with a sort of hessian just to keep it together. So it's a completely natural material, which is it's a really nice thing. And the way it works is you cut into the lino with tools, with gouges and knives, and what you cut away does not print. So what you cut away does not print. And then you ink up just the surface of the lino, and then that's printed down onto paper. So it's a form of relief printing, because you're printing off the relief surface. So you have to kind of think slightly backwards, because what you're cutting away is what will not print. So this is these are called blocks, and you can have a single block and just print it, and that's the sort of simplest form of lino cutting. Or of course you can have several blocks that are printed in succession, and so you have different colors printed on top of one another, and that builds up a print. So kind of that's what they look like. So they take quite a long time to cut, but of course once you've got them, you can reproduce things, you can produce additions. So that's one of the blocks for this print down here, which is my new print, only just been made, just been published.
Right.
And it's called Song for St Ives. And some of you might recognise it's the garden in St Ives, Barbara Hepworth's garden. And there's Barbara in the corner there, sculpting away. And any of you might have been down there, if you haven't, I'd strongly recommend it. It's a wonderful garden. You can go and sit in it and enjoy it. And it's a lovely sort of quiet area in the hustle and bustle of St Ives. So this was produced for the Hepworth Gallery in Wakefield, which is a gallery largely dedicated to Barbara Hepworth. So I'm showing some work there at the moment. So this was a print to sort of commemorate that, really.
We've got a question, Jeremy. Did you use ceramic glazes with lino?
With lino? No.
Yes.
No. Interesting though.
Yeah.
Interesting question. What I do know of, and I've tried a little bit of it, I've never really explored it very much, is using this to press into clay. Because I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of got a depth to it.
Yeah.
And so I do know of a lot of people that do that. It's a little bit difficult getting the clay to release, but I think there's ways around that. People can use talc and oils and all sorts of things. So yeah, and I think it's a really interesting question, that, because I think it sort of strikes at the kind of connection between that and ceramics. Actually, there is something, it's almost a bit like sculpting. It's kind of close to kind of, that cutting away. And the other thing that printmaking has, which ceramics has, is that kind of surprise factor. When you make a mark in clay, or when you open a kiln door and it's not quite what you expect. It's exactly the same with printmaking, is that when you print something, it's never quite what you thought it was going to be. And so you get that surprise element. And that to me is really important. I'll just show you a couple more prints. These are in wrappers, so they might.
Yep, great.
One's called Penzance Walk. It's my two of my mum's dogs walking in Morib Gardens. So they're often places that I've been to, things that I enjoy, things that I like. Show you one more.
Lovely.
Do you take your sketchbook out cycling?
Oh,
Jeremy?
yeah, definitely, yes.
I've seen you're a keen cyclist, so I thought, I wonder if he's
I'm very
got a
keen.
sketchbook. Yeah.
Probably not as good as I think I am, but I'm very keen. So,
Jeremy,
yes.
someone's asked if you could do a ceramic impression now. You can say no.
On the lino we're talking about, I take it.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it was the same person who's asked about the ceramic and lino idea.
The golden rule of public demonstrations is you don't do anything that you don't know will work.
You haven't practiced.
Yeah, exactly.
This is live, everyone. Live digital
Breaking that rule. Here we go.
Okay. do you want to go put it on? I've put you on the iPhone.
The iPhone. Okay. I think this will stick, but we'll see.
I don't want it to ruin your new lino.
No, it won't ruin it. It won't ruin it. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry that clay just a little bit in my hands, and that might give me a fighting chance on it. We'll see.
It's a really good camera, that you can see really good close up.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that your phone, Jeremy?
This is the phone.
Yes, that one. Yeah, it's really good.
So just by rolling that clay in my hands, just for a few seconds, that will have dried it a little bit, and we'll just see. So I'm going to press it in. I'll tell you what, actually, I'm going to press it in, then I'm going to leave it for a bit.
Oh, okay.
Just to build suspense, that is. And I think what it may do is it may give that clay a chance, because usually the way these work is water is absorbed from the clay into that. The clay shrinks very slightly, and that's what allows it to pop off. So we'll go on the same theory on that. So I'll leave that. I'll put it to one side. and we'll come back to it before the end of the demo.
Okay.
We've got
Oh, yeah,
a
go on.
question about your print, Jeremy. The print that you're using there of Barbara Hepworth's garden, I think. Someone's asking, how many blocks did you use for that?
Oh, that's a good question. 3.
Yeah.
3 blocks. Now, traditionally, you would have a block for each colour, but if you're canny about it, you can get more than that, because what can happen is if you've got certain areas, like the blackbird, that could be inked up in one colour, and then on the same block, you maybe could ink that area in that sort of green. And also, when you print more than one colour, when you print on top of a colour, you get a 3rd colour produced. So you kind of get like bonus colour.
Yeah.
Okay, so with 3 blocks, you can have many, many more colours than just 3, in fact. So the trick really is to have as few blocks as possible, because that obviously takes a lot of time, a lot of printing, but all the colours that you might need. And it is the thing of colours surprising you. So, you know, if you print, I don't know, a red over a blue, you should get a purple, but don't always. You sometimes get other things happening because there's other things in play. Right. So,
and you've got registration down to a fine art, I can tell.
Yeah.
There's not too much
I think I showed it to professional printmakers. I think they criticised, but yeah, it's one of those things which is good enough for my prints. So it works okay.
We've got a good question here. So, does your ceramic work influence your print work in the terms of themes, colour, and characters?
Yeah, hugely. Yeah, I mean, I want to make some blackbirds now. Yes, it makes often the things are kind of echoing one another, and they go backwards and forwards. And sometimes when I'm making drawings, I'm not even sure if it's a drawing for a piece of ceramics or whether it's a drawing for a print. And sometimes it can be both. So absolutely. Okay, how are we doing on time? We are okay?
Yeah. Well, it's 11:43, so yeah, another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, right. So I'm going to make the cross. So I'm rolling this out just as a coil.
Right, I'm just going to go.
And then I'm going to use one of my presses, and this one is sort of curved. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of got a curve on it. It's a sort of slightly odd shape. And what I can do is I can roll that down there like that. Roll it down there like that. And I get this, I'm starting to kind of get the upright quality of the cross. And then to make the top piece, I can use this stamp. So all these are these biscuited stamps. And then that can go on the top of that. And I can use another sort of just textured slab. This is one that's just taken from concrete, I think, just pressed into concrete and then fired. And I can just use that to give it a slightly aged, kind of weathered quality. Now, in the best traditions of these demonstrations, I've got a couple here I made earlier. Because these,
I've been wanting to say that, haven't you?
all these are quite, they're quite soggy. They all need to kind of harden up a little bit. And rather than have you standing around and waiting for me to harden up, I've got some that I produced yesterday, which have been hardening up overnight. So I've got a base, which is just firmed up a little bit. It's just been left uncovered. I've got a cat that has been modelled a little bit more, but not too much. And I've also got a cross, which I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to join these things together so you can hopefully actually see a finished piece. So to join these things to that, I use something called slip, which some of you might be familiar with. And slip is really just clay with a lot of water in it. It's kind of and it really becomes the adhesive. It allows us to join things. And so I put a little bit of slip on and I scratch up the surface to give it a key. And then I put the cat on first. So I do the same with that one. A little bit of slip on the underside. Scratch it up. This is the fun bit. And quite often what I'll do is I'll make a lot of different pieces. So I'll make a lot of different cats, several different bases, several different trees or Cornish crosses. And then I can sort of play with them and work out which goes with which. And that's enormous fun, because it's you get something you don't necessarily expect. Suddenly something goes with something. You think, well, I hadn't thought of that, but that's working a lot better than what I'd imagined. And so the work is really giving you something back. And then you can just start to squeeze these together. And this is when you start to see the piece kind of come alive a bit, and you can start to think, well, what sort of angle do I want? Do I want it sitting back? I probably can change this a little bit. There he is. And this is the Cornish cross. So that's the Cornish cross I've made for this one. So I've added some little appendages to that, so it's a bit more cross-like. And I've also cut it at an angle. I want the Cornish cross just to sort of sit at an angle. And sculpturally, I think that works better rather than just being upright. But also, anybody who's been to Cornwall and seen the Cornish crosses will know that you know, a lot of them are a bit kind of wonky and a bit leaning, and they've been there for a few hundred years. So they've got that sort of quality about them. And growing up with even Cornwall, you know, as a child, you know, you almost kind of stop seeing them really. They're such a commonplace thing. You find them by the sides of roads, middles of fields and things like that, even in farmyards sometimes. But going back to Cornwall as an adult, you sort of see them again. You kind of, oh yeah, I've forgotten all about those. You realise kind of what wonderful things they were, or are in fact. So I'm just going to put this one on like that, stick it on, then I'm going to pull it off, because then I can actually just see where it needs to go, and I can scratch it up. Get a little bit more slip on there, and then put the two together.
Just a quick question, Jeremy.
Yeah.
So what work surface are you using? Is that plasterboard that you're using?
It's just a piece of ply. Yeah, just plywood. It's been painted, but that just to allow things to be seen on camera, actually. So, but the paint's not important. Wood is important. I don't know if you can see this surface. This wood table is got a slight varnish on it, so you can't really work on that because the clay will stick to it because it's not porous. So it needs to be a wood surface. Certainly in my workshops, I find a wood surface is ideal for it.
And Jeremy, we've got another question about the standing and mounted figures, which are behind you.
Oh, let me pin.
On the shelves, I think.
Yes.
And Charlotte is asking, would you use an armature, or are the limbs solid?
No, there's no armatures in them. The trouble with armatures in clay is when the clay dries, the armatures will the clay will shrink onto the armatures, and then the clay will crack or just drop off. Mm. So you can't in fired ceramics, you can't use any armatures in the clay, and so that's why ceramicists and people that work with fired clay develop all sorts of ways of kind of building things like coil building and throwing and things like that to actually make hollow objects. So no armatures. The only place you would use an armature is if you were modeling something that then later was going to be cast into something else. So traditionally, people that make things for bronze casting will build onto an armature, often in plaster or in clay, but then a mold is taken off that, so the armature doesn't matter.
So are those solid, the limbs?
The arms will be solid, and the legs
Yeah.
and the horse will be solid, certainly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
okay.
Another question, could you just talk a little bit about what glazes you use?
Oh, excellent. That's such a well-timed question. I'm just going to talk about these. So just let me make a little bit of space. Sorry about the racket. We'll move those things over there. We'll move him. We can see him there. Right, excellent. Yeah. So glazes. I do lots of glaze testing. These have just come out. Don't know how well you can see those. I was really pleased with these. So these are test tiles. Aren't they beautiful?
Right. Yeah, they're great.
Such lovely colours, aren't they?
Mm.
So what I do is I roll out the tile and I put some texture on it so that the textures kind of mimic the object. So I can kind of see how the glaze is going to react. So I make lots of these test tiles. This is made in black clay, and then on the back I'll write exactly what that is, because it's so easy to get mixed up. So this is fired at cone 6 in oxidation. It's a glaze, it's a clay DS1, and it's something called salmon glaze under a blue oyster glaze. So there's 2 glazes going on there, in fact, actually, kind of, and there's also a white slip there as well, actually. So I can see there's several things going on. There's quite a lot of information in that tile. I also double dip them and single dip them. So that's a double glaze there, and that's a single glaze there. And then the white slip is there. So that gives me some idea of what the white slip underneath the clay will be. And that's where the white slip is not. So there's lots of information in one tile that I can read on that. Some of them don't work so well. You know, some of them are, that's a sort of slightly strange kind of pitted glaze. But I mean, even that might well have a kind of a place for something. So even glazes that traditionally don't work, you know, might be rejected by a lot of ceramicists. Actually, for me, can be really quite useful. So I do lots and lots of these. I've got a goldy glaze there, which is quite nice. That's working quite well.
It's
and
lovely.
Layer glaze, you get the really interesting things happening. So a single glaze on its own can sometimes be a bit dull, but you put it with another glaze on top of it, and you can get all sorts of magical things happening. So this is part of the sort of surprise of ceramics, really. I'm not really a chemist, you know. I'll just try a lot of different things, put them in the kiln, and you know, let's see what comes out. And as long as really good records are kept, you know that, oh yeah, I can replicate that one. I can get that on a piece of work.
We've got someone asking about your test tiles. It says,
Yes.
do you fire them on their back? And then don't you fear dripping on vertical surfaces? Right,
yeah, that's a good question, actually. So they're fired on that surface, so you never fire them glazed down. But yes, I mean, what I have done in the past is I'll make an upright tile as well. Like that gold, in fact, I know is a very runny glaze. It really runs badly. And I discovered that to my cost, in fact. So yes, ideally you'd have sometimes you'd have an L-shaped upright. So you could put some glaze on a vertical surface and see how much it ran. These, I know, these are all matte glazes apart from this one. I suppose a matte one. All this is a matte glaze. I know matte glazes, this particular matte glaze tends not to run very much, so it's pretty safe with this one.
And are they commercial ready-made glazes?
Yeah,
Jeremy?
some of them are commercial glazes and some of them are my own glazes. There's a bit of a mix of 2 things going on here. So, but I will buy them and try them sometimes. Usually on their own, I don't like them. They're usually not, I don't know, there's something that, I mean, like that's a glaze on its own. That's a single, an Amico. And I'm not particularly enamored with it. I don't particularly like it. But I know that if I combine that with a dry glaze and mine on top of it, it actually does really nice things. So it's a kind of useful glaze to have, but just not as it comes out of the tub. That one. Okay, so that's that. What else have I got to show you? Should we see what the line is?
How long do you leave the pieces to dry before firing?
A piece like that one that I've just put together, it's winter, about a week. In the summer. Right. In the summer, it might only be a couple of days, you know, once we get some really nice warm weather. It's quite cold and damp here at the moment, so yeah, it's more like a couple of days, more like a week, really. Right, so I've just popped that to one side.
Those tiles are beautiful, Jeremy. They could actually be some really gorgeous wall tiles.
I thought that when I leave them out on that board, actually, I thought,
yeah, nice. Really nice. Yeah.
Okay, so shall we try this?
Oh yeah, live. Yeah.
No. Tell you what I'm going to do, actually. I'm going to get a little bit of softer, stickier clay. And then what you can do is you can use that to sometimes just peel it back. Ooh.
Everyone's saying drum roll on the comments.
There you go. Well, it worked.
Wow, look at that. Amazing.
I don't quite know how clear it is, but it did work.
Really good.
Beautiful.
So there we go.
You can really see the connection between your 2 practices right there.
Yeah.
Can't you?
Yeah, maybe that's something I need to kind of work on a bit more, actually. I think that might be, in fact, you could cut quite small pieces of lino and stick them to a piece of ceramic like that. So you could then use it as a stamp. That might work quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you could use that in your prints as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, there's lots you could do. If you cut bigger ones like that with sort of random textures, you could roll things out on things. I'll just show you one more thing on this, actually, which is quite nice to do. Is You can also just kind of roll textures into them. So you can kind of use them on three-dimensional things. So you get that sort of thing happening.
Great.
So the way in which you use these, you know, are kind of a multiple, really. There's lots of different ways of doing it. Oh, I'll just show you one more thing. I don't know if any of you noticed that on the little star.
Oh yeah.
I've forgotten I put it on there. But that comes from these. These are plaster. So these are plaster of Paris blocks. And I usually mix up some plaster and then cast a few of these up and let them dry. And then after they've dried, you can cut into plaster. Plaster is very soft. And it works a bit like these. And then you can press clay into them. And you get stamps like that. And they can then be applied to things. So perhaps mix up some plaster of Paris and have a play with those. They're really great fun to use. How are we doing, Laura?
We are done. It is
we've got
11:56.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yes,
sorry, and then we've asked all the questions, and that is, do you wrap the ceramics pieces when they're drying?
Not if it's finished, no. A piece like that I wouldn't. If it was a bigger piece of work, I don't know if you can see the horse in the background, that's quite large. What I'll tend to do with those is just wrap them, when they're finished, is just to wrap them for a day or two, and it just lets everything equalize. So if I've been sort of, you know, working on the heads of the woman or something, but the rest is quite dry, it just allows everything time to even out, and then I'll just take the plastic off and let them go. But unless it's a very, very hot day, I won't particularly be too careful about it. I just let them go and they just dry.
All right,
great.
Okay.
I think that's
Thank
it.
you.
On time. 3
Thank you
minutes
for
to
answering
go.
all those questions.
Yeah,
Jeremy. It's been
amazing.
really fascinating.
Thank you
So
very much.
please head to Jeremy's website, which I've put in the chat, but which is www.jeremyjamesceramics.co.uk. And you can also follow him on Jeremy_James_artist on Instagram. So yeah, just a huge thank you. That was really interesting. Really, yeah, all the kind of molds you've been making, the stamps, brilliant. And those tiles, I love the tiles.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
so
And
much, Jeremy.
Thank you everybody for giving up a portion of your Sunday morning, and hopefully you got something from that. And thanks for all the interesting, intelligent questions. That's great.
We've got lots of lovely thank yous coming in
the chat. Someone is up. It's 1 a.m. Whoever.
I think that's someone in Singapore.
Someone in Singapore.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been amazing. So yeah, take care. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's.
Bye. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, who's tuned in. Huge thank you, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Have a good festival.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.